Welcome to the Soul Tribe Podcast. The Soul Tribe Podcast was created to help you navigate through the world of spirituality, wellness, and self-development in an easy, grounded, and relatable way. We break down everything from the Akashic Records, manifesting, spirituality, and so much more. We want to help expand your boundaries and bring the spiritual world to you in a fun and easy way. Get ready to be inspired with tips, tools, and easy to digest information. Let's do this.
Hey Soul Tribe. I hope everybody's doing well. We have a really good episode today. It's actually with Patricia Tabares. She is my humanistic astrology teacher. I've started studying astrology in March, I think it was. And I just loved the reading I got from her previous to studying with her, and she's just amazing. She knows so much and is a great teacher. So she's actually a rune reader, a humanistic astrologer, a flower therapist, an energy healer, a teacher, obviously, and she's also Kristos and Foster's translator. So whenever they do any type of events where there's Spanish-speaking kind of clients or people, she'll be there translating for them. So she has a wealth of knowledge in everything that's spiritual and knows so much. So she teaches, I believe, all of these subjects and more, and she's always expanding and learning new things. So she's somebody to look out for, and if you want to learn astrology, I highly recommend her. I'm going to finish my first year of astrology in December and going on my way to reading natal charts and all of that, so I'm super excited. But in this episode, we generally just talk about astrology. We go into different topics of astrology like natal charts. Also, we talk a little bit about Mercury and retrograde, Chiron, and then just really go in depth about different aspects of the natal chart and how it's so important to really kind of vibe with the person you're getting a reading from, because there's so many different types of astrology. So I think that's a good thing to keep in mind if you do, or you're interested in astrology and getting a reading. The type of astrology she does is humanistic astrology, which is a lot more of like a psychological astrology. And I actually had a reading from her, I think it was last year, maybe mid-year last year, I don't remember. But it was amazing, and it really helped me a little bit further on my journey with loving myself and understanding myself, because I have had so many Akashic Record readings, but I needed something more grounded, like something where it said, okay, you're going through this because of these things, and I could physically see them in my chart. And she was explaining it all to me because I'm obviously very curious and had so many questions for her. But she's just a really good episode. We talk all about astrology, why a natal chart can say so much about you and what you're going through or what you can go through, even about your health, which just blows my mind. And even the other types of readings you can do with astrology, like you can go with your partner and you can understand the dynamic of the relationship, or with, I just want to know what's going to happen in the next 6 months. So you can even do that and look at the transits that are coming up and how your chart looks with that. So there's so much information, and we're actually going to have her on again very soon, because there's a lot of energy going on right now astrologically, and we want her really to explain everything and really kind of give us a view of what's going to happen in the next 6 months. So look out for that episode really soon after this one. But yeah, I don't want to take up too much of your time. Let's just get right into the episode. We hope you enjoy it, and be sure to share it with anybody that you think might enjoy it.
Hey Soul Tribe! We're here today with Patricia Tabares, which is Lorena's current astrology teacher, which she's loving the classes. Patricia is not only a humanistic astrologer, she's a rune reader, a flower therapist, an energy healer, obviously a teacher. And a lot of you guys would love to know that she's also a translator for Kristos and Foster when they're in Uruguay, and I think Argentina too, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
That's amazing. What is it like before we get into the questions, what is it like working with them? Did your kind of path of spirituality and getting into astrology coincide with meeting them, or not really?
Well, actually, I think everything went hand in hand because, first of all, I love to be with them, to work with them because I learned so much. More than a translator. I'm so privileged to be part of their workshops because it's obviously what I have to translate, which I have to obviously understand, is on the other hand, I mean, great teachings that I incorporate even for my practice as well. So I love to work for them and with them because we have come to some sort of very nice possibility of interacting together. So it's at times I don't feel I'm working for them. I'm part of the team. So they make things so easy, and I mean everything flows so well that it's really amazing. And actually I think they chose me to be their translator because I was already in the spiritual path. And obviously, when they talk about their things, I know what they're talking about because otherwise it would be very difficult to translate something if it's not part of your language. I mean, on a more daily basis, kind of your lifestyle. So I can make sense of what they're saying. I translate not just word for word, I make sense of what they are trying to say. And so I think that is the reason why they came across me, or I sort of ran into them. I don't know what,
Who
how
knows
it
how it happened?
started exactly, but it is magical. Everything they do is so magical. And I think it's part of that magic that put us together.
I
So
love it.
I'm really happy and
So lucky
blessed.
you get to like experience things with them and be able to even like learn more, because it's not just translating, it's like you can learn their teachings and you can also teach as well. I think it's also like a, a give and take with that. But
Absolutely.
I
Yeah,
know.
besides, well, that being an astrologer for so many years now, whenever they talk about astrology, that's why I was saying I feel so comfortable with them because they sort of allow me to participate, to join in, to sort of share some knowledge. So it's really fantastic to be with them and do this
Yeah.
work with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you imagine someone that doesn't know like spiritual stuff trying to translate like
Oh my
spiritual
gosh.
stuff? Exactly. Like you can't
Absolutely.
translate it unless you know what the heck is going on.
Absolutely. Sometimes, I mean, I find this really fun and funny sometimes because when in this spiritual tribe we talk about burning your children, for example, for the sake of freeing them, imagine an outsider listening that you're doing this kind of stuff. I mean, you do it out of love and it means transcending, transforming, transmuting, which is what the fire does. But people, outsiders, might think that you've gone really
Yeah,
nuts.
crazy.
So crazy. So yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So how did you get into astrology? So what were you doing before you got into the astrology, and how long have you been doing that for? Because you said you've been doing that for a long time now, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, very interesting because I always say the same. My first teachers that guided me into this spiritual world and on this path were my children. My daughter, who is now 33, my son, who is 36. Actually, my son, when he was 17, he told me he was kind of interested in astrology. He is a very keen reader, so he was studying philosophy at the time. So he became interested in astrology. And so he asked me to try and find a place that was serious enough where he could start his studies. And so I went along with him. I drove him to the school. And to
Wow.
cut a long story short, I ended up, I mean, starting the astrology course, and he couldn't because he didn't have the time to do the course. So actually, he guided me into
His
this
soul
world.
helped you get there.
Absolutely. So, I mean, incredible. And the same with my daughter, because she was also, with my daughter, is a little bit more of a sadder story because she had a sort of accident, and this led her into trying to find answers for that wound. And so she became interested in numerology, and actually, she somehow or other got information about Odin, who is the mythological god that created or discovered the runes
I
and
only
the
I only know about Odin because I
Vikings.
watch Vikings. Yes. I'm a
yeah,
huge
well,
Vikings fan.
Yeah, when you watch the series, you can see them casting runes, so it's part of that world, definitely. So she trying to get her own answers. She told me that she wanted to start reading the runes, and she needed to find a teacher so that she could learn how to read them. Again, I found her a teacher. I went with her. She gave up the second day or so, and I continued with a course at that time, and that is how I got into all this. And then one thing led into the other one, because when you were saying, I also do other sorts of complementary therapies, and that comes again together with astrology, because when you read a chart, which is the reflection of the sky the day you were born, you have so much information about the person, and a lot has to do with your shadows, your obstacles, even health issues appear in the chart. There's a lot of information. So after my first readings, I realized that the people needed some sort of guidance or some sort of therapeutical backup. So I started wondering, okay, so what tools do I need to help people heal or get better or see better? And one thing led to the other one. So I started with the runes, and then with flowers, and then with healing. So it's everything is definitely related and connected. So that is how I ended up complementing the reading of the chart, which is the basis of my work. Actually, I always start off with a chart, whatever kind of process you want to go into. I always take a look at the chart, which is so revealing of who you are.
Oh my
That,
gosh. I had a
yeah,
reading with you,
you
and it
did.
was, I always tell Lucia, and I've talked about it on the podcast before, of how it felt like I could understand. I'm getting goosebumps just saying that. It's like I could understand myself so much better, of even things that I had to go through in my life, of like that was part of my journey. So it's really interesting seeing the difference of something that can come through an Akashic Records reading, but also it was on my chart like somehow, and it just shows the destiny of like your struggles and the things that you need to kind of go through to become this person that you are today, or to become the person that you want to become, that you feel that you have inside of you. But it is so
Absolutely.
revealing.
But how much does it change? Like, let's say that Lorena's was born, she's this way and her chart said this. What happens if she's born like 5 minutes earlier or 5 minutes later? Does it change a lot? Just like
Okay.
a few minutes?
That's an interesting question,
Right.
because that also, I mean, a very typical question would be, what happens with twins? I mean, if they were born on the same day, practically same time, unless they are identical twins, even born at the very same time. So, well, actually, the map, which is the chart, would differ very little. In some cases, there might be an important shift in what we call the ascendant, or the ascending sign, and that is definitely connected with the time and place of birth. So maybe not usually, but sometimes in a 2 minute, 3 minute difference, there might be a shift of ascendant. So there, the reading might differ, but good question anyway, what you said, because I can take a look at two practically identical charts. The energy would be the same, because that is what I see, the reflection of that very same sky. The thing is that you also have the free will to choose to somehow rather get consciously in touch with part of your chart that becomes your conscious living of that energy. But then there's that other side of the chart that you unconsciously ignore, or more consciously, which becomes your shadow. So you probably do not feel that you're exactly the same as the other person, because definitely the way you live that energy is different. But be it the light or the shadow, it's still part of the same map. So even with twins, to make it probably a little clearer, the energy of the chart is one, but suppose one of the twins is more lively, more friendly, more open to socializing. That is in the chart, and it is the chart of the same people. but the other twin may probably not feel so comfortable with that side of the chart, so that twin will live the energy differently, probably be more sort of introverted or more into a more private personal world, which actually exists in both people. But you are more conscious of what resonates with you, and then you kind of perform the energy of the chart according to those musical notes. I like to talk about your melody the day you were born. To me, the resonance of the planets is kind of music. And so you live according to that music that was playing in the sky the day you were born. So when you perform that personal song, you can choose your own kind of notes or melody or harmony, and so does the other person. So I don't know if I'm being clear, but the
Yeah.
chart is the same, but the way you show that energy consciously, that is your light, or unconsciously, which is your shadow, which will happen to you anyway, because whatever is in the chart has to happen. So what you do not consciously incorporate becomes what we call your fate, your destiny. It happens to you anyway. It is projected onto other people. So, these psychologists say these a lot. Whatever you don't like about the other person, check it out. It's in you. So definitely, whatever is in your chart and is projected onto the other person, this may kind of cause some sort of discomfort, or you may dislike it or reject it, but it's definitely part of your chart. Thing is that you have not consciously incorporated it, but it has to happen. And if it's not projection onto other people, it happens through fate. These people who say, why is it that I can never find a love partner, or why is it that I always keep changing jobs, or why do I have so much difficulty with money, finances? It's there in the chart. You need to consciously understand what you are overlooking, what you're ignoring, or, I mean, there are many different ways in which you can show that you're not actually paying attention to what the chart is telling you. So it's more about listening to the messages of the chart too, to know
Yeah,
who you are.
and the other person being open to hearing it, because that's what we went over in class the other day. It's like, with I think with Akashic Records, it feels so different, because for me, a lot of things that come through for my readings are a lot of things about their childhood, a lot of things that they didn't ask about, and it just comes up, and I have to say it. But with
Mhm.
you can choose the words, choose the information, and see what the other perceive what they're ready to hear, because there might be a lot of things in the chart that could be maybe they don't want to hear, or can't, or aren't ready to hear. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
But
Yes.
how do they get the chart? Are you like you're giving them like a manual to themselves, like to your life kind of thing, and then they can read it whenever they want and accept it whenever they want?
Well, actually, what I work with, which is previous to the session. I mean, we astrologers work with information a few days before, because there's a lot you have to look into. It's not just the chart. I mean, as it looks, there are many layers into that chart, so it takes really a lot of time. And so what I do is, in the session, I record the session. I don't write things down, and it's important that the person should have some sort of meeting with you, as a sort of online or in person. Today it's online. Um, so that, first of all, you need to get information, then what I call the personal narrative. I need to listen to your personal narrative, to your story, because then is when I can see in the chart where your light or your shadow is, what you were actually kind of consciously living through, or things that keep happening or happened to you at one time or another. So I can see that in the chart. So after I listen to the person, I start translating. That's another way of translating. It's not just English into Spanish or the other way about. I mean, astrology is a language, by the way.
It is,
And
yeah.
so that language I have to translate, I have to decode, and to help the person makes sense of that language, because I don't want to make it too technical. Otherwise, people, unless you're an astrologer or you handle the language, it's a waste of time. So what I do is I keep translating. I give you an example. For example, if I'm looking at some sort of Saturnal energy, Saturn, and an important kind of impact of that Saturn on the chart, instead of talking about your Saturn opposite your, I don't know, your sun, I would say, you tend to be confronted with obstacles, with many instances of authorities that confront you, and actually life will somehow rather show you that you need to learn to become your own boss, your own authority. So I'm talking about Saturn opposite Sun, but I'm translating
Right.
the meaning of it, right? So I also engage in some sort of narrative or story, which is your personal story, trying to tell you also the other part of the narrative that you missed out on or you didn't know. So it's more of what I tell them, but I like it to be interactive so that you can have your questions, that you can have your own insights, and that's very, very enriching. That's really very nice. So I record the whole session, and then I send the recording by mail, so you can listen to that as many times as you like. And then I send you the chart, of course, the map itself. And if you know a little astrology, it will make a lot of sense. And if you don't, still the chart is it is a photograph of the sky, but I like to use it as a kind of painting. If I show you a chart, many times I do this. I say, how does this drawing feel to you? And people might say, oh, there's a lot of here, there's nothing there, or how many lines, right? Well, that's part of the energy. So it's also good to get some sort of first insight into the chart by looking at the drawing. So back to your question, this is how I work. I have this session, I listen to you first. In the meantime, I check what I have kind of come up with a chart, confirming hypotheses, and rearranging the information, and then I pass it on to the person. So that is how I work. And as Lorena was saying, I really, of course, I have to tell the person everything that is in the chart, but I also have to accompany you in this process of how much you can understand, not intellectually, how much you can grasp from. There's a lot of information, so I have to go very slowly, carefully, reading your gestures, reading your body language to know that you're comfortable or you still need a little more time. The body speaks so well too that you have to take that into account, definitely.
For sure. That's feeding off the energy. But I recall us when we did our reading together, you asking me some questions, which I was like, oh, interesting. Because I've gotten a few readings, like natal chart readings or astrology readings, that felt a little bit different. And that's something I wanted to ask you as well, like, because this astrology I'm learning, which I felt so connected to, the humanistic astrology. Like, how does that differ from all the other branches or kinds of astrology? Like, there's predictive astrology and all that. I don't know any other branches, but like, how does yours like differ from the other general branches?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because as you were saying, the material we work with is the same,
Yeah.
except with Vedic astrology, the chart looks different, because they also work things out differently. They focus more on past lives and also the mission of the soul. Although in traditional astrology, humanistic astrology especially, we do also take into account past lives and the mission of the soul. There are parts of the chart that also talk about this. But yes, you're right, there are many different kinds. And the approach I have for my own readings is more on the line of psychological information, in that I consider the chart to be more than just a 1 day session reading, which sometimes is. I mean, not that you cannot do that, but what is more interesting is to take this as a kind of personal process so that you can have different readings at different times. And so a lot of information is unraveled like this. And then it's more about what I think I made it clear before, it's more about not so much about prediction. You're going to move houses, you're going to find the love of your life, a blue-eyed, fair-haired, tall guy, I mean, the prince charming that many women dream with. I mean, it's not about that. It's more about to fully understand who you are and to have the chance to, yes, to foresee or preview what probably comes ahead. Those are the transits in the sky. I mean, the sky resonates all the time, planets move all the time, and that, of course, information has a direct impact on your map. It's like your GPS. So it's important then that you understand who you are in terms of personality, in terms of subconscious, unconscious, your fears, your weaknesses, and your talents and your strengths. Everything is in the chart. So once you get to know yourself a little more, a little better with time, more and more, then we can go into deeper layers of information, because we also, in humanistic or psychological astrology, we also see other charts which speak more about your evolution. These are called secondary progressions for those of you who know astrology. So we take a look at secondary progressions, which is a sort of evolving information, or information that shows how much you have evolved throughout your life, and who you probably are today as a result of all the information that comes with a chart. But then there are people who work more with, they call it horary astrology, and that is if you want to know precisely or more clearly what is going to happen when, or if suppose you start a project, so you want to know exactly when to start it, how to start it, right? That is more specifically information about certain precise events. And there are people who work with more classical astrology that is more predictive, and it is more technical also, because when it is more medieval classical astrology, it is more about how many degrees this planet, and they have like very special names like malefic planets, or awful names that I don't like.
That doesn't sound nice.
Yeah, no, not so nice. So anyway, it's all the same map, but the outlook, the viewpoint differs. And it's interesting. I always recommend also to my clients that they have every now and again a reading with somebody else, because it's important
that one you're talking about, what is it called? Horary?
Horary, yeah.
I think that's the one I got once. It's like the one that says between this month and this month is a good time to get like dental work. Between this month and this month, I literally received it, go, thank you, and I like threw it in a closet and never looked at it again. It's so bad.
Imagine having to go everywhere with your daily plan.
Yeah, but also I'm one of those people, like I don't like being told what to do, and I like living like adventure. So I'm like, there's no adventure. Yes. There's no adventure in this. Goodbye.
I agree. So it doesn't mean that, for instance, every now and again I get a WhatsApp message, look, I have to undergo surgery, or I have to sign a contract. When do you think is the best time? You can do that. I do that.
Yeah.
There are certain windows that you have to take into account, because they're the best time for, or the worst time for. So don't do it.
Yeah. Yeah, like
Mercury
we were talking about. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
That's something you take into account for sure.
Definitely. And then, of course, what is more interesting is to see how it impacts your chart. It's always based on the personal chart. I'm not too fan of just talking about signs in general or energies in general, I do, but I like it more when I have the chance to talk to you in particular and guide you along. And then there's mundane astrology, by the way. I'm actually learning that myself now more. I started like to go more deeply into it, which is the astrology of the world, of the countries,
Right.
of a
That's
country.
amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
I
you need
mean,
to tell us all about Uruguay.
do you want me to? I mean,
One
wow,
day.
the world these
That's
days. But
interesting.
anyway, yeah, the
Yeah.
skies, I mean, had been shouting about these changes, these transformations. We astrologers, we never imagined it would come with a virus, but still, the energy was there already. I mean,
So you saw it.
yeah, we saw it coming. Not exactly with the virus, I must tell. There are a few astrologers who did see something of a sort because, what has been going on in the sky, especially for the last 3 years, is something that has always announced very conflicting times or catastrophes or wars, especially every 30, 35 years. I mean, the First World War, Second World War, the Cold War, and then the Spanish flu and AIDS. That already was written in the sky. So there's a very similar combination of planets these days. So we knew that there was a before and after. We do not know the after, no one does, but the fact that there was a big collapse coming worldwide, we could tell. We could tell. And what is interesting now that I mentioned mundane astrology is that you work with the map of the country when you have it, because some countries they do not have their own map, astrological map. Many
Oh,
do, but
wow.
some don't. Some maps they were somehow or other um, drawn, so to speak, by some astrologers who studied a lot historic events and things that marked important moments in the history of the country, so they could draw a map that seems to make sense. But there are other countries, Uruguay, Argentina, the United States, Brazil, they do have charts that you can trust. And
And are
so
you like looking at the birth of the country?
Yeah.
So the day that it was independence for the country, it's like its birthday.
exactly, or foundation of a city, for example, because there's the chart in Argentina. We have the Independence Day as the chart for Argentina, but then for the city Buenos Aires, that was founded twice. Well, we have the second chart, which was better than the first one. So best to choose that one as the chart for Buenos Aires. But then we have the chart for La Plata, which is the capital of the province. So you see, we can go more deeply into more specific land areas. So it's very interesting.
Very interesting, especially
Very,
with everything happening, right? Seems like this will be something people are going to be looking more into, right?
I'm sure that from now on, because only I don't know, 10 years ago, it wasn't so common to talk about astrology. I myself had to think it twice to say I was an astrologer, but now it's like you know everyday language, and practically everyone has had some sort of experience with a chart reading, and our voice is being heard more and more. And I think that if some countries or people in power, if they listen to astrologers a little more, I think they would benefit a lot from this.
Yeah, imagine that.
There were some American presidents that
Yeah,
actually had astrologers on their team, and
yeah.
I'm trying to remember which one because there was one that had up to six. I don't
Bush,
remember which president it
I
was.
know Bush, I know Bush
Yes,
did, and
Bush followed an astrologer. Yeah,
his wife especially. Yeah.
yeah.
And then I'm not too sure about the
There was
rest, but
another president before Bush, much before Bush, that I had heard that had up to 12 different astrologers always informing him, and steps like going after another country or things like he would ask the astrologer before doing it.
which is what the kings did in the
Yeah.
past,
Oh, that's
So
right. The Kings did it too.
they
Yeah.
did. astronomers, astrologers were the same people. I mean, the astronomers worked with astrology the other way about. So they were consulted all the time. And
Wow.
well, probably in those days, astronomers, astrologers could see the sky better without all these skyscrapers and everything. I mean, street lights that do not allow us to see the sky so well. But yeah, they did use their knowledge and information to be guided, definitely. So yeah,
That's
and for
interesting.
example, an interesting kind of anecdote, not anecdote, it's like what things were like in the past. For example, when people, they couldn't choose who to marry, they were, I mean, this was decided for them. So one of the criteria that was followed in those days was to choose someone who had been born 6 months before or after you. And that, if you take a look at that on a map, that is the sun of the person, which is the sign actually, where the sun is in your personal galaxy, that is your sign. 6 months before or after would be the other person's sun would be opposite your sun. And this is a good synastry principle. I mean, if you, among other things, if you want to know, well, who could I pair up with for a partnership, business, or life, whatever, this is one of the criteria, but not the only one. So don't just follow this as a rule to choose.
It's just like there's more like possible harmony.
Exactly.
Right?
There
Yeah.
is some sort of balance there. So it was one of the criteria used in the past to choose who you would marry, and with somehow or other good future possibilities. So, interesting
That's
how
pretty cool.
much astrology can do for you. And then health-wise,
Yeah.
I work with what I call um, what do I call it in Spanish? Let's see, cosmotherapies, because I use cosmoterapia so that you hear me speak Spanish too. And with these cosmotherapies, what I do is I take a look at the map. From there, I can tell, for example, which minerals you need to kind of replace or supplement yourself with, because the chart already says what you can have in excess or you can lack. So and with this I work with the Schussler's salts or biominerals. So you can also see, I mean, a person's tendency to develop some sort of liver condition or heart condition or diabetes, whatever, or so common these days, panic attacks, everything is in the chart. So there is where I use floral therapy to complement the diagnosis, say, the information, or healing as well. So there's also very interesting in terms of how much information you can get in the chart to for your betterment at every level. It's mind, body, spirit. So yeah, it's all in one chart.
Yeah, it's
So
insane if you think about it. You did a really interesting class online the other day about health and astrology, which I missed because we were with our Akashic Records course. But I heard it was great, and I saw the PDF and stuff. And I remember health stuff coming up in my chart, and I was like, wow, because I asked about that. I remember asking you, like, is there anything I need to think about? And I remember you telling me, like, yeah, this thing here, just be careful. It might be a problem in the future.
yeah,
But it's just
because
interesting.
yeah, because it's not that I'm going to tell you, I mean, what you will fall sick with or ill with. It's more like, your Achilles heel is this. The body speaks a lot about what has been going on with you before the symptom appeared. Edward Batch, the doctor who discovered these beautiful flowers of the
I'm upset. I love black flowers. Love.
yeah, absolutely. And there are many systems. They are all very nice, but batch is the first one and basic one. And he used to say that when you have a symptom or when you come down with an illness, that is your soul shouting what you were not able to hear or listen to before. So once the symptom appears in your body or in some part in your body, then you have to also see what is more interesting, the origin of that, because of course you have to go back into that so that you don't repeat the symptom again, which is what traditional medicine does. It's okay, you get medicine to relieve the pain or to make your liver work better, but it will come back unless you see what was the origin of it all, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. So
yeah, I think that's even with ourselves. That's why I loved getting a reading, because it helped me understand myself and my patterns, things that were happening, things that I have issues with. Like, it's very eye-opening, because it felt so different than any other kind of reading I got. It was like, it's right here, you can see it, and you're reading it out to me and telling it to me in a way where it's very relatable, so where I can understand myself, and then I can be like, oh, okay. So it's like I was able to accept things about myself. It was really weird. But like, what do you usually, when people come to you, like, do they come with an issue, or do they just come for a reading? And do you find that people have that same sensation I had, maybe, of accepting themselves more, or coming out of a reading feeling like they understand themselves more? Because I feel like the Akashic Records does that too in some ways.
yeah, all these readings, they're fantastic, and we have so much access to these things today that make our lives so different. And yes, definitely, well, people come for different reasons, mainly many out of curiosity, because it is also a kind of fashion these days to have your chart read. So some people come with that, and then they come out different because they say, oops, you told me so many things I was not expecting, because obviously the idea is to go into parts of your chart that really reveals something that can help you transform, right? That is the main idea. But then, yeah, there are people who come with specific issues. Usually, mostly when people come with issues, they ask for their solar return, and I will very briefly explain what this is. That is your natal chart. That is your DNA, personality DNA. It's, your basic chart and where all the information is. But then, obviously, that sky that will kind of freeze and become your chart, the sky itself continues moving. So the movement of the planets, constant movement of the planets, kind of update that information or impact that information. So if you need to know something specific, why am I feeling like this these days, or why is it that this year I whatever, or do you see any changes coming at work because I'm really not happy with my work, whatever, well, then I have to take a look on the one hand at the sky and how it impacts on your chart. Those are called the transits. And then there's this solar return, which is on your birth date. The sun in the sky goes exactly to the same place where the sun in your chart is. So the sun returns to the original place. So that is the solar return. On that day, sometimes a day before or after, so don't be surprised if your astrological birth date does not coincide with your birthday, but that is when the sun returns, the chart freezes also. And so I get another chart for the year. So when we talk, and Kristos Foster, they talk a lot about, as from your personal year or your year or this year, and they mean from your birth date to the next birth date. And so there's a whole world of information there about things that you should be kind of open to or kind of aware of to make the most of the energy that is available, right? So it's like great opportunity to know how to plan your year or what things to really take advantage of or wait for, right? So, and sometimes people come for that, for the solar return. But then again, it's funny because when I start, I always start with a natal chart anyway. So I remind you of this and that. And people, again, a second reading, third reading, you are surprised again to hear more things, right? So I spend a lot of time again with a natal chart and then the last of the session with a solar return because, the basic information is essential. Otherwise, what the sky might reveal for that year makes no sense, right? Especially when, as I was saying, I'm not so much into predictions that are you know, steadfast, I mean, or unchangeable. When people sometimes hear, oh, this year they told me I'm going to move house. I say, okay. But then maybe they come back and say, I finally did not move house. Of course, because moving house does not necessarily mean moving out into a new home. You move house if suppose you live with your daughter moves out, you move house because even if you're in the same house, your home changes. Your daily routine changes, and maybe you use your daughter's bedroom as your study, you move house, you see. So that is what actually I like to share with my clients. I mean, your home, your house is moving. Are you anticipating any changes? So if you want to make changes, this is the year to make them, either moving out or moving furniture around or putting down a wall, whatever. And also you warn people that they may get problems with water. It's funny because when they return, you say, you told me my house was going to get flooded. It did, the kitchen, or there was, a sink broke. Well, that you can see in the chart too.
In the solar return.
That is with the solar return or transits. If there are some people who come on a regular basis to see things for the next 3 6 months, whatever. And so it's more about guiding, not predicting. And that is what I want people to understand. It's not so much you're moving house, you're moving into a new house, something is moving at home. And it can be not even the house, it's the household, the home, the family. And
That makes
so,
complete sense.
yeah.
Especially like we want, like everybody, not everybody, but a lot of people I find now is like, what's going to happen? Like, what's going to happen now, next year? Like, and people like want answers. And it's like sometimes the energy, we have to see what energy is coming, like where you're at. How are you going to react to it? And that's like something I wanted to ask you as well. You mentioned free will before, and we talk a lot about that in the Akashic Records. So how much of this natal chart or information that you can extract has this free will, has these karmic maybe lessons or kind of karmic ties to what you're here to do, your soul path, you know what I mean?
I understand, definitely. Well, the chart obviously kind of draws the information very clearly, and you can see or read there the life plan. The thing is that the you can always choose the path, even though the energy is one and the same, and maybe the result is the same. You can choose which way to go with a chart as though it were your map. It is actually a map. And then, as I usually say, the anecdotes will differ. That is, the story itself may differ, but the energy field is the same. Let's see if I can put it clearly also. Suppose that the chart speaks of violence, aggression, right? So that, of course, I can see that chart for a criminal, and I can see the same chart for a shaman. It's the same chart. The thing is that you can use the knife to stab someone in their heart, or as a shaman to cut off ties and free your soul of past, I mean, wounds or ties, right, that you need to let go of. And so there's a knife there, but it is your choice whether to cut up bread and share it with others or kill someone. So yeah, there is free will as to how to use the energy that is one and the same. You
That
see?
makes total sense. That makes total sense, especially with the Akashic records, like we talk about. It's like you're here to learn specific lessons, but you have the free will to go through them in a specific way, to stumble 10 times or to learn your lesson the first time. So energetically, the energy's there. You have to learn that lesson in this life, or you have to, I don't know, I feel like in some ways, Lucy and I were supposed to do this podcast to help people and to bring light to a lot of spiritual things. And we could have chosen not to, but we both felt this calling and followed it. So I think, it's our choice. It's our free will to do whatever we want. And that's why I don't like the idea of someone telling me like what's going to happen. It's like, I'd like energetically to know like if things are going to, be difficult, and maybe I should wait a little bit more time. But if there's a lesson I need to learn.
I'm laughing because Lorena's fine. If they tell her, give it more time, Lorena will wait patiently. But if they say, do it now, Lorena's like, no.
Of course, you can choose that. Definitely. Yeah. It makes so much sense what you're saying. And the fact that, well, I mean, these days especially, so I mean, people need so much to to hear these things, or be able to at least, I mean, listen to things that can make their lives, I mean, gain more sense, right? Because obviously we are at a very special time when things are changing. I mean, things are transforming at such a great speed, but well, there's this opportunity to also take advantage of these changes. So what you're doing, girls, I think it's fantastic because, and you've been doing it for a long time now, right? So
Lucy has been doing this. Well, the podcast, we've been doing it for almost a year.
Almost a year.
But Lucy has been an Akashic Records reader for,
12 years now, I think.
wow.
I was very pushed into it. I wouldn't have done it if I always say that my soul, my set of masters pushed me to do it. With via dream premonitions that I had for many years. But also I needed that push because I was very like very angry person. I was very off track. So I could have chose to keep going that way, but instead
free will.
yeah. I used my free will and my wake up call to go, okay, you know what? This is for something. Let me go down that way instead. So yeah.
And the fact that you were open to these signs and these messages, because many people are kind of, until they wake up, I mean, they can miss out on many chances. Definitely.
I think it's easy for people from South America to be like, okay, well, because we all have a grandma that gave us drink these teas and bathe with these teas. And Lorena and I had a grandma who would come with scissors and be like, let me cut all this out of you. And she would work on your energy with scissors. And South American people grow up with family members that believe in this stuff. And they're always like, get it out of you, get it out of you.
Definitely. Yeah. It's true. But
the fact that your children guide you into this is amazing. That's so crazy.
I always say they have been and they still are my teachers in many senses. And it was thanks to them. With my daughter, it was a little bit more, more of having to help her also recover from that incident. So that is also when I turned to florotherapy and healing as a means to help her. And she's fantastic now. She's a singer, she's an actress, she's, a very powerful woman fighting for the rights of women these days. She's doing great. She's doing fantastic. And my son also is it's a beautiful person, a very, nice soul. And, but they are not doing anything connected with spirituality per se. They love this. They ask me to read runes for them, or prepare flowers for them, or check the stars for them. They do. We talk a lot about this, but actually they do things that have little to do with directly with the spiritual world. So Yeah, it was thanks to their guidance and that I'm doing what I'm doing and so happy about it.
I
I
love
used to
that.
be a teacher of English. I mean, you asked me in the beginning, I don't know if I answered that part of the question. So I've always been into teaching, but it was a different language, you know. I was teaching English. I started very, very young also. I love teaching, I always have, and communication also in all shapes and forms. So I think it has to do also with my origin as a teacher, that these languages make so much sense to me, and I my soul is here also as part of its mission to pass information on to others. Every time I learn something, I have this inner urge to go and reveal it and share it and you know and teach it.
Yeah,
I
and you
mean,
can tell by your classes too, the way you explain things. It's so digestible, it's so understandable, it's so retainable, that like I find myself like wanting to keep studying afterwards. I'm like, wow, this is so interesting. And then I'll always, after the class, I'm like Googling stuff and looking up more stuff. I'm like, wow, this is so interesting. It's
that's
so
great.
fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great to motivate students because besides, I keep learning thanks to you guys also. I keep learning. I mean, the
Mm,
best teachers are the ones that are open to continue, learning, especially through this interaction, through your questions, your
completely.
doubts, the information you bring. Yeah, that's fantastic. And really, I love teaching.
You
So,
can
yeah,
tell. Yeah.
I enjoy it.
So like you were talking about doing like somebody specific chart, right? And we're talking about your children, how they led you into this. Did you ever do a chart of you with your children to like see how it is that they came in to teach you that? Does it show up for you if you compared it or brought it together somehow?
Absolutely. Yeah, that you can do. I mean, this is what you call the synastry between charts. And it's interesting to see how actually within a family, charts make so much sense. It is a family constellation. I mean, the charts are part of a family constellation. So when you see the interaction among the different charts, you see how you were kind of yeah, this how something in your daughter's chart enlightened part of the path for you, or even the obstacles, difficulties, or problems that you may have in a certain relationship. It's that tension is the one that allows you to try and find answers and then evolve and really take advantage of that very same thing. But yes, the same way you do with a potential partner, you do with your family, and it's a very interesting kind of research because it makes a lot of sense, and you can
Wow.
even see whether things of past lives as well. If you were somehow rather, most probably all were within the family in some way or another connected, but sometimes you can tell a little bit of the origin of that kind of bond. So,
So
yeah,
you can do like someone can come with their partner and get their, oh, that's interesting. I didn't know you did that.
yeah. There are two kinds of charts. This will also, I guess, interest you because, sometimes people tell me, I want to give my niece, my cousin, a sort of wedding present. So I would like you to do the synastry between the charts. And I always say, bad choice. Don't give them that as a present. There's another chart which is called the composite chart. And let me tell you the difference. When you take a look at the synastry between two charts, the connection, you see everything there. If they're going to have good communication or they're going to be at odds with each other, you can see, you can tell. So imagine as a wedding present to say, wrong choice. I see divorce coming soon. So, no, that you can do, of course, if it is very interesting, and I do it a lot with couples that want to work on their relationship, and
Okay.
even when they're going through a crisis, and see, how can we understand each other better? What can I do, or modify, or somehow or other change in order to, to get along better. So both ways. So that works very nicely. But I always say it's important that you should come first alone for your reading to understand your chart. Then your partner should come on his, her own to listen to the chart, and then together. So that once you know your chart well, then the chart of your partner will also make sense. So there you can see again the lights and the shadows. The other chart, the composite chart, which is very interesting to do with your life partner, business partner, or one person that you interact with a lot, like you two girls.
Yeah, us too. I was just thinking that.
That it is very interesting because it is Lucia's chart, let's call it A, Lorena's chart B. There is a combination of both energies into a third chart, which we call C, and that is the composite chart. So it is the energy of the blend, of the combination. So it would be like, how do you interact, or what you are like as a combination, like for this this what you're doing with your podcasts, for example. Or I remember I did it with my daughter when I was living with her. My son had already moved out. So to see how we interacted, I knew how we interacted, but still I wanted to get information and see how I could improve it. So this composite chart was very revealing. So I think
cool.
that is a nice present, because it is the identity of the couple, not the A and the B, because there can be clashes too.
Put together.
So, yeah. So that is a better gift.
That sounds better. Yeah, I don't know how I'd feel if someone's like, hey, here's, like, if I wasn't interested in it, here's an astrology reading, like, okay.
Yeah, well, if you're going to give it to
but
somebody, you know that they're into that, right?
Yeah. But you know what is also very now becoming more popular, and I think that is a very also useful tool, babies' charts. Obviously, the reading is different from the reading of an adult, or even for teenagers. But with children, which is something I have specialized in also with babies, it's an excellent tool for the parents, because you knowing that, for instance, your child feels really comfortable on his, her own for long periods of time, because it's in their chart, it is part of their energy field. Then parents do not get obsessed with this kid, will not interact with other kids, or he spends so much time alone in his bedroom playing with his things, with his toys. It is part of his energy, and you have to respect it. Of course, there may come a moment when something may turn kind of pathological, but it's not what you see in the chart. What you see is that the nature of that kid is also in part being on his own. So you have to respect that. Or, for example, the kind of schooling that is best for that kid. So you can tell kids that are need a lot of space, so you have to choose a school where sports is something really important as part of the curricula, or that the school itself, the building has, extension of land so that they can run around. And then there are kids that are very intellectual. So it doesn't matter so much how big or small the school is. It's important the academic part of the program, the syllabus of the school, or more artistic. The kid needs, in order to learn better through, this principle of multiple intelligences. There are kids that learn better with art, with music, or with numbers, or with words. So you have to respect the style of the kid. So you can see that in the chart. So you can tell parents, look, first schooling, don't choose a very big school where the kid is but a number. You have to look for a school that is small and that pays a lot of attention to the kid, who will not will not find it very easy to interact just with anyone, needs his space. We can.
Yeah.
It's interesting also to as a kind of guidance for parents.
That sounds super interesting. That'd be cool to do that with Aurora.
I would love to do it with Aurora. She has a lot of things that are nothing like me that I like don't get sometimes.
How old is she?
Yeah.
How old
She's
is
she's 3 years old, but she barely speaks because she's listening to English, Spanish, and Dutch. So
she?
just maybe 2 weeks ago, she started communicating a little bit more. But she's very different from me. Like she doesn't really like to talk. I obviously don't like to talk. No, I love to talk.
I can tell.
She's very, very, very shy, but it might also be sometimes I wonder if it's her personality or if it's the language barrier where she changed countries and cultures and languages so many times. So I never really know, at least until I do a chart maybe.
Of course, that would, be very useful. Besides, well, when it comes to incorporating a language, the first 2 years, now she's 3, but the first 2 years, it's a lot about incorporating, listening, and then becoming some sort of very perfect machines to imitate the language with the original accent. And then when they start talking, they do so very well, but it's after a period of incorporation. Incorporating, listening, everything is kind of becoming in some way a, a print in her mind. And I'm sure that one day when she starts speaking more fluently, she will speak all 3 languages very well.
Yeah.
Because if she was able to be in touch with different languages as from a very early age, that is fantastic for kids. Best way
Yeah.
to learn a language with the actual accent.
That's what we did. Like we moved to the US. I was 5 and Lucia was 3. So I think that's the only way we get it. When people are like, where are you from? We're like, Uruguay.
Yeah, sure.
You don't sound like you're Uruguayan.
You sound
I don't know.
local.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
That's funny. That's funny. You're saying that they try to copy the accent because now that I think about it, I speak mostly to her in English, but because also Sandra and I speak to each other in English a lot. But I'll talk to her in Spanish because I want her to have Spanish. But she doesn't speak my accent, and she doesn't speak his Dutch heavy with English, accent thing. She speaks this weird in the middle.
Well, maybe there's too much input.
There might be.
There's
Kind
a
of
lot.
blending it into her own stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
3
but it's
languages is a
great.
lot.
Yeah.
3 is a
Yeah.
lot.
But then in the future, she would be so thankful because, learning a language formally, quite a stress.
It's
If you learn
hard.
naturally, it's so hard. Yeah,
It's so hard.
Yeah.
sure, sure.
Yeah.
We don't want to take up too much of your time, but I think maybe if we can talk a little bit about Mercury in retrograde, just
Yeah,
because I know
sure.
that's coming up, and I'm not sure when this
Yeah,
episode's coming out, but I'm sure it'll be
yeah,
close around that time. And I
absolutely.
know there's a lot of
The
misconceptions.
dates, I wrote them
I feel
down.
like people use it as an excuse a lot these days.
Yeah, and I do too.
Retrograde didn't mean to be so offensive. Obviously, you can always blame Saturn for your grim face.
Yeah.
Well, actually, except for the sun and the moon, all the planets go retrograde at some time or another. The thing is that Mercury has become very popular because Mercury, for us human beings, is part of our everyday life. With Mercury, we communicate, we send and receive messages. With Mercury, we move, we travel, we use our cars or buses, run, or we actually move from one place to the other. It's also about negotiating with other people and signing contracts. So, things that we do on a daily basis, as I was saying. So that's why every time Mercury goes retrograde, an alarm starts sounding, and be careful. Well, what retrograde means is that all the planets move at a certain pace, And when they are direct, what they are supposed to do, they do it fluently and well. So Mercury, when it is direct, in principle, communications flow, transportation works, and also your electronical devices work well, internet, though this is not always the case, but even when it is direct. But then you have to also, I don't want to make it too complex, you have to take into account also the sign Mercury is in. For 30 days, it will be in the same sign. For instance, Mercury is in Gemini now. So for a month, it will be Mercury in Gemini, and then it moves on to Cancer. So for 30 days, Mercury will somehow rather activate its function in a different way, which is the sign. And then there are questions of aspects when, for example, again, Mercury is not retrograde, but it gets a very strong influence of Neptune. Communications can be confusing, or you can become very sentimental or emotional with your thoughts or what you hear, and it moves you to tears. That is not Mercury retrograde. It can be the influence of another planet, in this case Neptune, impacting on Mercury. But back to retrograde then. When the planet goes retrograde, it doesn't actually move backwards. It is the pace becomes lower. It slows down. So the rest of the planets that are direct, they move on, and it gives this optical illusion that the planet is moving backwards, as when you are on the road, and a car moves faster, the other one slower. It seems as if it went backwards.
So literally the planet is moving slower, in like real time it's moving slower.
Exactly. So it changes the pace, and before it goes retrograde, there is a period of, say, 4 or 5 days when the planet is stationary. We say it is, again, an illusion, an optical illusion, when it seems that the planet is static or stays put. It doesn't move. That is when the planet is stationary, 4 or 5 days before it goes retrograde. Then comes the retrograde period. Now, Mercury will go retrograde on June the 12th up until July the 17th. But then again, before it goes direct, it will be stationary again. So actually you have to consider like 5 weeks, 1 week before, then the 3 weeks when it is retrograde, plus 1 more week to be safer on these grounds. During this period, because Mercury is retrograde, it is more possible that communications will somehow rather be more difficult. For instance, internet collapses, or you send an email, it doesn't come out of your tray, and it stays there for days until you realize that it never reached its destination, or there are misunderstandings, or, well, I don't know, there in Argentina we're still in lockdown, so we cannot travel around or move around, but if we could, it would be very possible there would be delays, or picket lines on the roads. And also, if you buy a new telephone, or even your telephone can go a little bit crazy during those days, you can't get through to people, or all of a sudden it goes blank. I mean, many funny stuff can happen. So what you have to do during those days is not actually to put everything on hold, because you can't, but you have to...
Sorry, boss, I'm not going to work. Mercury's in retrograde.
Can't make it to the office, so yeah. What you have to do is what retrograde invites us to do: reread, revise, rethink, reanalyze, re-examine. So you do whatever you're supposed to do, but you take your time you take your communication inwards very seriously, because that is also retrograde. It goes inside you. It's more effective. So it's fantastic with Mercury retrograde for thinking, planning, not acting on things, but like, revising, reviewing, and also for getting inspiration. And then when the time comes, then you uh, come out with that, or you communicate it, or, you publish an article, whatever. But you're in retrograde. It doesn't mean that you're not going to write your stuff, but, it's more inner work that is retrograde. And then, for example, I remember when I was in LA with Foster and Kristos, I was staying at their place because they had a workshop I was going to translate for. So I went there thinking I'm going to buy my Mac. I had another one and I wanted a modern one. So I'm going to go to the Apple shop to buy my Mac. And I knew that Mercury was retrograde. Imagine traveling from Buenos Aires to LA by plane, Mercury retrograde. So nothing happened, everything was okay. Then I got there, I had to translate for 7 days on a row for many hours on end. So I was,
Communication.
Mercury for translation. Chaos. Well, not that I remember anything special. But what happened when I went on the following day, when I arrived there the following day, Kristos drove me to the Apple store, and I knew what Mac I wanted, so I was very ready to buy it. I did. Took me 5 minutes most. So I got back to their place, I turned it on, and then I realized my memory was very small because I had an iPad, I had an iPhone, I had another Mac. So the moment I opened this Mac, the memory got stuffed up. So I said, okay, so what now? It's, Mercury retrograde. But then, one thing is in Argentina, another thing is in the United States. 7 days later, went back to the Mac store. I said, this computer, I need more memory, no problem. They erased everything, opened a box, there you go. And that's the story. With Mercury retrograde, that is what happened to me. So it's not that terrible things can happen. Thing is, you have to be more aware of what you're buying, what you're saying, what you're writing, where you're going. If you have all your papers on you, very common with Mercury retrograde, you get to the airport, your passport is due. I brought...
It sounds like in Uruguay, Mercury is always in retrograde. You never have the sufficient paperwork when you go to any public office.
I see. Well, but there's always a Mercury to blame for.
Always.
That's a good thing. But yeah, again, the stars are guiding us all the time. So when you look at the stars, they send the message, be open to the message, and there you have an easier path to choose if you pay attention to that. So that is what astrology is mainly for.
Agree.
One, I know that we're like really late on time. One little small, I think it's a small question. You're looking at the planets, but you're also looking at the constellations, right? Sure. Now, I remember that the South Hemisphere has way more stars than the North. So there's more constellations then?
Well, interesting, because also there are new stars that are being discovered all the time. Asteroids, planetoids. So there's this question, like, what do astrologers do with all this information? Well, in principle, we work with the matrix, the astrological matrix, which is more of the classical sky, except with the additional Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto that were discovered quite recently. Imagine Pluto, 1930.
Did they take Pluto's title away? They said it's not considered a planet because of the signs or something, was it?
Yeah, they call it the dwarf planet, but it's the smallest, powerful.
He's very powerful.
Poderoso el chiquitín. Very powerful, this little guy.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, but yeah, for a while it was called a planetoid, not really a planet, a dwarf planet, but Pluto rules. Pulls the strings and is a big, powerful energy. So, we astrologers pay a lot more attention every day. A lot of what has kind of collapsed in the world is due to Pluto, especially.
They take away his title, but he fights back then.
Yeah. Yes. So as I was saying, yeah, some astrologers, they pay a lot of attention to stars, very interesting. But the truth is that Aries is Aries, Taurus is Taurus. If you were born on a certain day, you know that your sign has a lot to do with that sun that you were born with. So the reading is not really affected by that. Of course, yes, there are like some specific things that you can always add to your reading, which makes it more colorful. But astrologers in general, we have a lot of information already with the more traditional matrix. So that is the one at least I use mostly. When people come for a reading or they are in a session online and there's after 2 hours reading, I say, okay, I could continue with a reading for 7 days in a row from morning to evening and still continue with your chart. But, you have to take it slowly and listen to the nucleus first, to the most important energetic information. And then there's a lot more you can then read into a chart. It's never ending. You can come for a reading every year. I can kind of start off with your natal chart. New things will, or either you will listen to things you never heard before, or you are listening differently. So it's like a new reading because now, yeah, now I understand. Or maybe you told me, but I didn't remember that. That is because there was so much information that in the end, you take this and that, and that is what you actually then remember for a while. But it's never ending.
That makes sense.
Mystery world.
So you said it's a lot of layers, right? So many layers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And there's a lot of information, and we haven't spoken about past lives, but there's a lot there with the 12th house, with Chiron. I love to talk about Chiron in the chart, the wounded healer, and we can then some other time talk about this stuff if you like.
Yeah.
And the nodes, the north node, the south node has a lot to do with the mission of the soul. So
I actually bought myself a book about the North Node. I was like so fascinated by it. I was like, okay.
Yeah.
And I read all through that, and it totally feels so right. Yeah, it was interesting.
And eclipses, which is also a topic I'm sure you would love to have information about. They happen when the sun and the moon are either together or opposite each other, but with the nodes involved. So an eclipse happens when the sun and the moon are close to the nodes, not otherwise.
Oh my God, I could talk for hours.
Me too.
But Lorena wants to definitely have you on again to talk about, the year that we're having, how this was already seen, and how we can absorb it, what we can do to change, or what do we need to change, and etc, everything else.
Yeah, and all this other stuff like the eclipses and all that. That'd be great. I think people would be.
There's a lot we can talk about if they're interested, and you can have me talking for hours too, so no problem with that. So
yeah, we'll definitely have you on again. We just want to thank you, Patricia, for coming on and giving us so much information. We really appreciate it. Do you want to maybe tell everybody, we'll have everything on the show notes, but if you want to tell everybody how they can contact you, how they can get a reading with you, like how would they get in touch with you and all that?
Okay. Well, if you know, Instagram, Facebook these days, my name, Patricia Tabares, then if you write it down. And then I have like a school, actually, it it has no building. The school is me wherever I go. And that is Avalon, Escuela para el Alma. That is Avalon School for the Soul. And also, I mean, I don't have a web page actually. But I work with Instagram and Facebook. You can reach me there, message me there. And yeah, I'm all that willing. I work a lot with people, I mean, who are not in Argentina. You know, these days with the internet, you
Yeah.
can be anywhere in the world, like in this case.
Yeah, and you teach
And
as well, so
yeah, yeah,
that's a good thing for
yeah,
people
I
to
do.
know.
Yeah, Spanish and English.
Yeah.
Yeah. Y saludo a todas las personas de habla hispana también para que sepan que lo pueden hacer.
Love it. Thank you so much. Oh my gosh, it's
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Rose. It was nice to share this time with you. Lovely.
same here.
Lovely.
Thanks for your
Really
time.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. We really appreciate you subscribing and listening to us. We had so much fun talking to Patricia. She had so much information she shared. It was really like very eye-opening with things I'm already studying with her. So I want to give her a quick shout out and thank you to Patricia, and hopefully, and actually not hopefully, we know we're going to have her on again talking about the eclipses and some kind of just energy for the rest of the year because there's so much going on right now. So you'll be hearing her on the show very soon. And I just want to remind everybody that we have an Instagram and we have a Facebook. So make sure you go follow us there and keep up with all of our latest news and information. And as well, if you feel called to share this episode with anybody, we would really appreciate that. That's the best way for us to expand and to have our message be brought out to everybody. So feel free to do that. And if you feel called to leave a rating and review on iTunes, we would greatly appreciate that. That's going to help us grow and expand as well. And just show us some love if you really are enjoying these episodes. That would mean a lot to us. We hope you guys have a great week, and we will see you next week. Bye, guys.